Beloved and chosen one, something brought you here today, and it was not an accident. You did not stumble into this message by chance. You did not find this video the way you find a recipe or a news clip. Something in you was already leaning toward it before you even pressed play. Because there is a part of you, deep and quiet and tired of pretending otherwise, that has known for a long time that you were made for something more than what you are currently living. And today, that part of you is being addressed directly. I want you to hear this from the very first moment. You are one of God's chosen ones. Not in a way that is distant or theoretical, not as a title written in a book you cannot find, but as a living, present, active reality in your life right now. And I know that might be hard to receive, especially if this season has been one of the harder ones. Especially if you have spent months or years quietly wondering whether you were forgotten. So before I take you any further, I want to name something. I want to name what you have been carrying, because chosen ones carry things that most people around them cannot see. You have been experiencing something that does not have a simple name. Maybe you have noticed that your dreams have become more vivid recently, more layered, as though a message is trying to reach you through your sleep. Maybe you have felt a sense of frustration that you cannot fully explain, a restlessness that does not belong to ordinary tiredness, a feeling that something is supposed to be happening and it is not happening fast enough. Maybe you have found yourself pulling back from people and places that used to feel comfortable, not because you are unhappy exactly, but because something in you no longer fits where it used to fit. Maybe you have received the same message, the same theme, the same word, from completely different directions, from a stranger, from a song, from each time it lands, something in your chest recognizes it before your mind does. These are not random things. These are not symptoms of a problem. These are signs. They are specific to the chosen ones. They belong to people who are being repositioned, not abandoned. They belong to people who are being prepared for something their current circumstances have not yet caught up to. And you, sitting where you are right now, are one of those people. You are what some would call an earth angel, a soul placed in this particular moment in history, with a specific assignment that no one else can carry. Heaven has not forgotten your address. Heaven has not lost track of your name. In fact, the reason everything around you has felt like it is pausing, shifting, and settling in strange ways is because the preparation is not still happening. The preparation is complete. The season of waiting has not paused. It ended. Before I take you deeper into what this season truly means, I want to pause for just a moment and share something with you. There is a reason some people seem to move through life with a kind of clarity and creative power that others cannot access, and for a long time, science and spirituality were offering two different explanations for the same phenomenon. But in recent years, those two explanations have begun to meet each other. Researchers studying the brains of highly intuitive, highly creative individuals discovered something remarkable. Chosen ones, people wired the way you are wired, are born with stronger gamma brainwave activity than the average person. Gamma is the frequency associated with moments of sudden clarity, deep insight, and what some call divine perception. But here is what they also found. Long seasons of hardship, isolation, and prolonged waiting oppress that frequency over time. The very season you have been living through has been working against the very frequency you were born to carry. A neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers, with over 30 years of research and an affiliation with MIT, spent years studying this exact suppression and what it takes to reverse it. What he found became something called the genius wave. a 7-minute audio experience that uses precisely calibrated sound frequencies to restore the gamma and theta brainwave activity that your waiting season has been dimming. 7 minutes a day. That is all it takes to begin the restoration. If you feel something stir in you when I describe it, the link is already waiting for you in the pinned comment below. We will come back to this in much greater detail very soon. But I did not want to take you through everything that is about to unfold without first giving you that anchor. Now let me go deeper with you, because the stirring you feel right now is not a coincidence, and I do not want you to dismiss it. There is a version of you that existed before the waiting, before the silence, before the season where things stopped making sense. That version of you had a certain fire, a certain boldness, a way of moving through life that felt connected to something larger. And then the season came, and the season was long. And in the long season, something quietly happened that no one warned you about. You began to make peace with smallness, not because you gave up, not because you stopped believing, but because the human mind can only hold on to a vision for so long before it begins to renegotiate the terms of hope. But that fire was never extinguished. It was banked. It was protected beneath the ash of the long season, kept alive precisely because it was needed for what is coming. And what is coming requires a fire that has been tended in secret, not one that has been burning loudly in public. The work that is waiting for you on the other side of this season is not work that could have been built on the version of you that existed before. It requires the version of you that has been shaped by the wilderness, refined by the waiting, hollowed out in all the right places so that something greater can move through you. This is your moment of arrival, not tomorrow, not when circumstances shift. Now. And to help you feel that arrival in your body and not just your mind, I want to give you a 3-step practice before we go any further. Step 1. Think of one thing you are grateful for that did not happen. Not something you received, but something you were protected from. A door that closed, a relationship that ended, a path that turned out to be the wrong one. Sit with the gratitude for the protection, not just for the provision. Step 2. Say this to yourself, not out loud if you are not alone, but in the deep interior of your mind. The time I have been counting is not the time that matters. The time that matters is the time that is beginning now. Step 3. Give yourself 7 minutes of silence. Not to think, not to plan, not to problem solve. Simply to be still and let whatever is beginning to move in you have the space to move. If you just felt something shift while I described those 3 steps, if something in your chest loosened or lifted even slightly, I want you to know you are not imagining it. What is stirring in you right now is real, and it is not small. Somewhere on this earth, there is another chosen one who has been sitting in the same silence you have been sitting in. And this message is meant to reach them the way it reached you. If something in what I have shared has named something real for you, consider pressing like so. This message can travel further. And leave a word in the comments so that another chosen one, when they arrive here feeling alone, will find that you were here before them and that you showed up. Share this with one person in your life who is quietly carrying something heavy, because they may not have words for what they are feeling, but this message might. And if you have not yet subscribed, this is an invitation to do so. Not for the channel, but so that the next message finds you without you having to search for it. There is also a donation link in the pinned comment below, and if you feel moved to leave something there, know that you are not giving to a platform. You are passing light forward to the next person who will need exactly what you found today. You've just been given a practice and a beginning. What I am about to share with you next is the full picture of something I only briefly introduced. And after 7 minutes of stillness, I believe you are exactly ready to receive it. Earlier in this message, I briefly mentioned something. Now I want to give you the full picture, because what I shared in those first few minutes was only the surface of something that goes much deeper, and you deserve to understand all of it. Let me begin with something that researchers have been studying for decades, something that most people never hear about, because it lives at the intersection of neuroscience and spiritual experience, and very few people are willing to stand in both places at the same time. But I am going to stand there with you right now, because what I am about to share is going to reframe everything you thought you understood about why the chosen ones seem to move through life differently. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Researchers call it gamma. It is not a metaphor, and it is not a spiritual abstraction. It is a measurable brainwave pattern that sits at the upper range of what the human brain produces, typically above 40 cycles per second, and it is associated with states of sudden insight, creative breakthrough, deep pattern recognition, and what many people across many traditions have described as moments of divine clarity. The monks who enter deep states of prayer produce it. The artists who describe losing themselves in a creative flow produce it. The ordinary people who have described moments where everything suddenly became clear, where a solution appeared from nowhere, where they felt connected to something larger than themselves. Those people were producing gamma in that moment without knowing what to call it. And chosen ones are born with a stronger baseline of it than most. That is not a spiritual boast. That is what the research shows. People who are wired for deep intuition, creative vision, and spiritual sensitivity have a brain that is naturally oriented toward gamma states. It is part of how they are made. But here is the part that no one talks about. Here is the piece that explains so much of what you have been living through. Long seasons of waiting, prolonged uncertainty, chronic stress, and the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying a calling no one around you can see. These things suppress gamma activity over time. The brain, under sustained pressure, retreats to lower frequency states as a way of managing the load. It is a survival mechanism. It is not a flaw. But the result is that the very people who are born to operate in the highest frequencies of human perception are often the ones whose circumstances have worked hardest against those frequencies. The chosen ones who are born to carry the most end up, after years of the wilderness season, operating in a state that is far beneath their original design. This is why the waiting has felt so disorienting. Not just emotionally, not just spiritually, but at the level of how your mind works. You were built to see clearly, and the long season has been dimming that clarity in ways you could feel but could not name. This is exactly what Dr. James Rivers spent over 30 years studying. Dr. Rivers is a neuroscientist with research affiliations at MIT who dedicated the better part of his career to understanding what suppresses gamma brainwave activity in high-potential individuals and, more importantly, restores it. What he discovered was that the brain does not need years of meditation practice or intensive intervention to return to its natural high-frequency states. It needs the right external signal, delivered in the right way at the right duration. The brain, it turns out, is extraordinarily responsive to precisely calibrated sound frequencies. When exposed to the right combination of tones, it does something called entrainment, which is the natural tendency of the brain to synchronize its own electrical activity with a rhythm it detects in the environment. This is not a new discovery. Entrainment has been studied for decades. What Dr. Rivers contributed was the precise mapping of which frequencies delivered in which sequence and combination most effectively restore gamma and theta activity in adults who've experienced long seasons of suppression. The result of that research is the Genius Wave. The Genius Wave is a 7-minute audio experience. You listen through headphones once a day, and the precisely engineered sound frequencies do what years of pressure have been preventing your brain from doing on its own. They guide your brain back into the gamma and theta states it was built for. Theta sits between 4 and 8 cycles per second and is associated with deep creativity, accelerated learning, and the kind of intuitive knowing that chosen ones describe as hearing something before it is spoken. Gamma, as I described, is the frequency of breakthrough, of sudden clarity, of the moments where everything that was scattered becomes coherent. 7 minutes. That is all. The reason 7 minutes is the optimal duration is not arbitrary. It is the window in which the brain can achieve meaningful entrainment without triggering the fatigue response that longer sessions can produce. Dr. Rivers found that sessions shorter than 5 minutes did not allow sufficient synchronization, and sessions longer than 15 minutes began to produce diminishing returns in the groups he studied. 7 minutes sits precisely in the window where the brain can shift, stabilize, and carry that elevated state forward into the hours that follow. You may remember that in part 1, I gave you a practice that included 7 minutes of silence. That was not a coincidence. That silence was a preparation, a space where your brain was already beginning to quiet itself, already releasing some of what it has been holding. What the Genius Wave does is take that natural quieting and guide it with precision so that what happens in those 7 minutes is not just rest, but restoration. I want to share something with you that I received from a woman who found the Genius Wave after a season that sounds, in several specific ways, like what you have been carrying. She had been in her wilderness for 4 years. She described it as feeling like she was doing everything right and arriving nowhere, like there was a glass wall between her and the life she could see but not reach. She found the Genius Wave through someone who shared it with her the way I am sharing it with you now. She used it every morning for 3 weeks before she noticed the first shift, and the shift was not dramatic. It was a quiet thing. She said she started finishing thoughts that she had been abandoning for years. Ideas that used to dissolve before she could hold them began to stay. And then, in the 5th week, she said something arrived, and she used that word deliberately. Arrived. Not happened, not occurred, arrived. As though it had been traveling toward her for a long time and had finally found the address. An opportunity she had not pursued, had not applied for, had not asked for, came to her through a connection she had not cultivated, in a form she had not imagined. She said the only thing that had changed was that she had spent 7 minutes a day creating the internal conditions for things to land. Some of you are thinking that $39 is not nothing, and I want to acknowledge that feeling fully before I say another word about price, because it is a real feeling and it deserves to be named. If you have been in a long season of waiting, then every dollar carries a weight that it does not carry when you are in a season of abundance. To spend money on something that represents hope when hope has been expensive is not a small thing. I am not going to minimize that. What I will say is this. The Genius Wave normally carries a price of $49. For a limited time, through the single link in the pinned comment below, it is available for $39, and it comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, not 30 days, 90 days. That is 3 full months to use it, to sit inside the 7-minute practice every morning, to notice what shifts, and to make a fully informed decisions about whether what experience was worth what you paid. If it is not, the refund is yours, completely and without complication. I want to be clear about one thing before we move forward. There is only one place to access the Genius Wave at this price with this guarantee, and that is through the single link in the pinned comment below this video. There are imitations, and there are unauthorized copies circulating in places I cannot control, and I do not want you to find your way to something that is not the real thing after everything you have been through. The link in the pinned comment is the only one I can stand behind. It is the only one that carries the guarantee. It is the only one I trust to give you what I have described. The time to step toward this is now, not because of scarcity for its own sake, but because the moment you are in right now, this particular convergence of readiness and recognition, is not a moment that stays open indefinitely. You came to this message for a reason. Something in you has been moving toward this specific threshold for longer than you may realize. And the Genius Wave is not a product that sits on a shelf waiting for a convenient time. It is a tool designed for exactly the kind of moment you are in, a moment where the internal preparation is complete and the external restoration is what remains. If something in you is saying yes, trust that. The link is in the pinned comment. It will be there when you are ready, and I will be here when you come back, because what I am about to share with you next goes even deeper into what this season has truly been about. And I do not want you to miss it. What you have been feeling is real, and I want to name it with more precision than anyone around you has been willing to offer, because the chosen ones who are in the middle of their season are often the ones who are most surrounded by people who mean well, but speak in generalities. They tell you to stay positive. They tell you things happen for a reason. They tell you your time is coming. And none of that is wrong, but none of it is specific enough to reach the place in you that is actually hurting. So I want to go there now. I want to name what is living in that place, because being named is the first step toward being free. The first sign I want to name is this. You have been experiencing waves of sadness that arrive without warning and without an obvious cause. Not the kind of sadness that belongs to a specific loss. Not grief that has a clear object, but a sadness that settles over you like weather. That makes you feel heavy in a way you cannot explain to anyone around you because there is no single event to point to. This is the sadness of a chosen one who can sense the distance between where they are and where they are supposed to be. It is not depression, though it can look like it from the outside. It is a spiritual ache, a homesickness for a life you have not yet lived, but can somehow feel waiting for you just beyond the edge of where you are standing. The second sign is that familiar places and familiar people have begun to carry a weight they did not use to carry. You walk into a room you have walked into 100 times, and something in you resists it in a way that makes no logical sense. You sit across from someone you have known for years and find that the conversation lands differently now, that what used to feel like enough no longer reaches you. This is not ingratitude. This is not restlessness born of selfishness. This is the sign of a soul that has been expanding in the dark, growing larger than the containers it was placed in, and beginning to press against the edges of a life that was sized for an earlier version of you. The discomfort is not the problem. The discomfort is the evidence. Something in you has changed, and the life around you has not yet caught up. The third sign is a recurring dream or image that involves a door. Maybe you dream of standing in front of a door that will not open, or a hallway with a door at the end that you never quite reach. Maybe it is not a dream but a waking image that surfaces in moments of quiet, an impression of a threshold, a sense of standing just before something without being able to cross into it. This image is not a symbol of failure. It is not your subconscious telling you that you will never arrive. It is a communication from a deeper part of you that knows a door exists and is oriented toward it even when the waking mind has given up looking. The recurring nature of the image is not a sign of being stuck. It is a sign of being held at the exact right place until the exact right moment. The fourth sign is that the same message keeps finding you from completely different directions. A word in a song lyric, a phrase in something you read by accident, something a stranger said that stopped mid-step, a feeling that arrived in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday and refused to leave. Each time it arrives, something in your body recognizes it before your mind has time to analyze it. The chest opens slightly. The breath changes. There is a sense of recognition that is almost like remembering rather than learning. This is not coincidence. This is how heaven communicates with chosen ones in the season just before the shift. Not in thunder, but in repetition. Not in grand announcements, but in the same quiet word, arriving from enough directions that it can no longer be dismissed. And alongside these four signs, there has been something else that I want to acknowledge before I go any further. There has been the insomnia. The 3 o'clock mornings where the mind will not settle and the silence of the house feels louder than any noise. There has been the loneliness, not the ordinary loneliness of being physically alone, but the specific loneliness of being in a room full of people and feeling unseen, of being the person who holds space for everyone else and rarely having anyone hold space for you. There has been the feeling of having been wronged, of having given your best in places that did not honor it, of having trusted people who were not ready to carry what you offered them. And there has been the feeling of being misunderstood, of trying to explain something that lives in you, and watching the person across from you look slightly past you, as though they can see your words but cannot quite receive them. I want to say this very carefully and very directly. None of that was punishment. Not one day of it. Not one sleepless night. Not one relationship that did not hold. Not one dream that seemed to expire before it arrived. Every single one of those experiences was a form of protection and positioning that could not have been achieved any other way. There is a difference between being overlooked and being positioned, and I need you to understand that difference at a level deeper than your intellect, because your intellect has probably already told you this, and it has not been enough. Being overlooked means being seen and judged not worthy of elevation. Being positioned means being moved, deliberately and carefully, to the exact place where your assignment can be received. The people who overlooked you did not have the capacity to carry what you were bringing. The rooms that did not open for you were not meant to hold what you are about to carry into them. You were not passed over. You were protected from arriving too early into spaces that were not ready for you. Now, I want you to hold what you just received, because this is not information. This is recognition. And recognition is different from information in the same way that being called by your name is different from being described. Something in you just shifted, even slightly, even in a way you cannot fully articulate. And I do not want that shift to pass without being marked. What you have just recognized in yourself is not yours alone. All across the world right now, chosen ones are sitting with the same recognition, named for the first time by the same four signs, breathing slightly differently than they were a few minutes ago. If this message has seen you today, consider pressing like so. It can reach the next chosen one who needs to be named this way. Leave any word in the comments, even a single word, as a way of marking that you were here and that you showed up for yourself today. If someone in your life has been quietly struggling to find stillness in a noisy season, this message was made for them too. So consider passing it to them. And if you feel moved to leave a blessing in the pinned comment below, know that you are not giving to a channel. You are passing something forward to the next person who arrives here needing exactly what you just received. I want you to type the word "ready" in the comments below this video if what I have just described has named something real in your life, not as a performance, not as a formality, but as a quiet declaration from you to yourself and to every other chosen one who will read it after you. Not almost ready. You are ready. Not soon to be ready. Ready now. What I want to share with you next builds directly on what you have just recognized. Because being named is only the beginning. What comes after the naming is the honoring, and there is something that has not yet been honored in your story that I want to address before we go any further. What you have just recognized in part 3 deserves to be honored before anything else is said, because recognition without honoring is only half of what you came here to receive. You have been named. You have been seen. And now I want to sit with you in something that most messages about chosen ones skip past too quickly because they are in a hurry to get the promise. And they forget that you have been carrying a cost that has never been fully acknowledged. I want to acknowledge it now. I want to acknowledge with the same directness and the same care that I have brought to everything else in this message. Because what the long season has taken from you is real, and it deserves to be named before it is reframed. The first thing the long season took was relationships. Not just relationships that ended badly, though some of those are in your story too, but relationships that never got to be what they could have been because you were in a season that did not allow for the kind of presence those relationships needed. People you loved who needed you to show up in ways the wilderness would not permit. Friendships that drifted not because either of you stopped caring, but because the season pulled you so far inward that the distance became too wide to bridge. A partnership or marriage that carried the weight of years of uncertainty and came out altered on the other side. People who did not understand what you were going through and eventually stopped trying, not out of cruelty, but out of a limit that was there to carry, not yours. The relationships that could have been built during those years, the conversations that could have happened, the memories that could have been made. Those are real losses. They are not imagined, they are not small, and no one has sat with you in the grief of them long enough. The second thing the long season took was a version of your career or your purpose that you can no longer retrieve. There were years when you had momentum, when things were building, when the trajectory felt clear and the next step felt visible. And then the season came, and the momentum stalled, and you watched opportunities that seemed made for you go to people who appeared to carry less preparation, less depth, less genuine commitment to the work. You watched doors open for others that stayed shut for you, not because you were less qualified, but because the timing was not yours to control. And there is a grief in that too, a specific and legitimate grief for the years that could have counted differently on paper, for the career that might have looked further along by now, for the professional identity that the season delayed or dismantled in ways you are still quietly rebuilding from. The third thing the long season took was the freedom to speak your dreams out loud. There was a time when you could say what you were believing for, without bracing for the silence that followed, without watching the expression on someone's face shift from interest to polite skepticism. But after enough years of believing for things that had not yet arrived, something in you learned to keep the largest dreams private, to protect them from the exposure that seemed to diminish them. And so you began to carry the most important parts of your vision in silence, sharing only the edges of it with the people around you, holding the center of it alone. That is a particular kind of loneliness that very few people will understand unless they have lived it. The loneliness of being the primary keeper of a vision that's not yet arrived and may not arrive in time for anyone else to believe in it alongside you. The fourth thing the long season took was a portion of your faith in yourself. Not your faith in God, not your spiritual conviction, but the simpler and more vulnerable thing of trusting your own instincts, your own timing, your own capacity to read a situation correctly. When you have believed for something long enough and it has not yet come, a quiet voice begins to ask whether you misread the signal, whether you heard what you wanted to hear rather than what was actually being said, whether the calling you felt so clearly in the beginning was something you constructed out of need rather than something that was genuinely placed inside you. That voice is not the truth, but it is real, and it has been there. And no one has given you permission to admit how often you have had to argue against it in the middle of the night when no one else was listening. I am giving you that permission now. You can admit it here. You can let it be true that the long season cost you something that you cannot simply reclaim by hearing that it was worth it. The acknowledgement comes first. The worth comes after. And right now, we are in the acknowledgement. I want to bring you now to a woman whose story I believe you know, even if you have never been able to see your own reflection in it clearly enough. Her name was Hannah. Her story is told beginning in the first book of Samuel, in the first chapter, and it is one of the most honest accounts of prolonged waiting in all of sacred literature. Hannah was a woman of deep faith who carried a desire so specific and so personal that it could not be transferred to anyone else. She wanted a child, not as an abstract longing, but as a concrete daily, unrelenting ache that shaped every waking hour, and she did not have one. Year after year, she did not have one. While the people around her were moving forward in the ways that the culture of her time measured forward movement, she remained in a place that looked, from the outside, like standing still. But what makes Hannah's story particularly difficult to sit inside is not just the waiting. It is the quality of the waiting. She was surrounded by a life that required her to show up, to participate, to be present at the table of an ordinary existence, while carrying something extraordinary that had not yet arrived. She went to worship every year with her household. She sat at the feast. She went through the motions of a life that was full in many ways and hollow in the one way that mattered most to her, and she was not surrounded by neutral observers. There was someone in her immediate circle who was actively unkind to her about her emptiness, who used her unfulfilled longing as a point of provocation. Year after year, in the place where she was supposed to be most safe. And then came the moment recorded in the first chapter of the first book of Samuel, when Hannah went to the temple and prayed in such a state of private devastation that the priest who watched her assumed she was intoxicated. She was not performing her grief. She was not presenting a composed version of her desperation. She was on the floor of her need with nothing left to protect. And even in that posture, she was misread. The very person whose role it was to hold sacred space for her looked at her broken prayer and saw something other than what it was. I want you to sit with that for a moment. The priest saw the outside of her prayer and drew the wrong conclusion. The people in your life who have watched you from the outside and drawn conclusions about where you are and what you are doing and why things have not yet moved, they are doing what Eli did. They are reading the surface of something they do not have access to. They are not wrong because they are unkind. They are wrong because the inside of your season is not visible from where they are standing. What looks like intoxication from the outside is intercession from the inside. What looks like instability from the outside is intensity from the inside. What looks like delay from the outside is preparation from the inside. Hannah did not explain herself to the crowd. She explained herself only to the priest, and even then only enough for him to understand that she was not what he assumed. And after she had spoken, the scripture records that she went away and ate, and her face was no longer sad. Not because the answer had arrived. The answer had not yet arrived, but because something in the act of bringing her full truth into the sacred space changed the weight of what she was carrying. She had not received the promise. She had received something equally important, the permission to be exactly where she was without pretending to be further along. That permission is yours right now. You do not have to be further along than you are. You do not have to have an answer for why it has taken this long. You do not have to perform a faith that is further ahead of your feelings than it actually is. You can be Hannah in the temple, speaking the true thing into the sacred space, and let the weight of it change even before the answer comes. What Hannah did not know in that moment, with her face pressed toward the altar and her words barely audible, was that the season she was living inside was not a closed one. It was a threshold. The chapter had not ended. It had simply reached the place where the turn was about to happen, the place where everything that had been accumulating in the hidden season was about to become visible. You are at that place right now. The cost has been real. The losses have been real. The grief is legitimate and does not need to be minimized or hurried through. But you are not at the middle of the story. You are at the turn. There is a language older than the one you grew up speaking, and it carries inside it a way of understanding time that your culture never gave you. The absence of this language is part of why the long season has been so disorienting. Because you have been measuring something sacred with an instrument that was never designed for sacred things. You have been using a clock to measure a calling, and a clock will always tell you that you are late. What I want to give you now is a different instrument entirely. One that was forged not in the ordinary passing of days, but in the deep and purposeful movement of heaven toward earth. The ancient Greeks had two separate words for time, and the difference between them changes everything about how you understand the season you have been living through. The first word was chronos. Chronos is clock time, sequential time, the kind of time that moves in one direction at one speed, and that accumulates into days and months and years, whether anything of significance happens inside them or not. Chronos is the time you have been counting. It is the time that told you a year had passed, and then another, and then another, and that the gap between your present circumstances and your original vision was growing wider rather than narrower. Chronos is not a lie. It is simply incomplete. It is the measure of quantity without the measure of meaning. The second word was kairos. Kairos does not mean a long time or a short time. It means the right time, the appointed intersection, the precise and unrepeatable moment when conditions align in such a way that what could not happen in any other moment becomes not only possible but inevitable. Kairos is not earned by accumulation. It cannot be manufactured by effort or accelerated by strategy. It arrives when the preparation is complete and the purpose is ready to be received. And when it arrives, it does not ask how long you have been waiting. It simply opens. You have been living in Chronos. You are about to step into Kairos. I want you to understand something about the relationship between these two kinds of time, because this is the piece that most people miss. Chronos is not the enemy of Kairos. Chronos is the container in which Kairos is carried. The years you have been counting, the months you have been enduring, the days you have been waking up inside of and pushing through without visible progress, those were not wasted chronos. They were the vessel being shaped to hold the kairos that was always coming. A vessel that has not been through the long forming cannot hold what kairos brings. The weight of what is about to arrive in your life requires a container that was built in the wilderness, not in the comfortable seasons. And you have been in the wilderness long enough to be ready. There is a second layer to this that I want to bring you into now, because kairos alone does not complete the picture. There is a concept that runs through the oldest sacred writings, a concept that does not have a single English word but that can be described this way: the appointed time. Not a time that is hoped for, not a time that is possible, a time that has been set, fixed in the fabric of what is real, immovable regardless of what appears on the surface of chronos. The appointed time says this: what God has ordained, delay cannot cancel. It does not say delay does not happen. It does not say the waiting is not real, or that the cost is not real, or that the years do not leave marks on the soul that carries them. It says that none of those things have the authority to undo what has been set. The promise that was placed inside you before you understood what a promise was, the calling that was woven into your design before you were given a name for it. Those things operate on a timeline that chronos cannot touch. They were not set in clock time. They were set in appointed time. And appointed time does not run out. It arrives. Hannah knew chronos intimately. She had been counting it. Every year returning to the temple. Every year sitting at the feast. Every year carrying the same unanswered ache into the same sacred space. By every chronological measure, her situation was not improving. The years were accumulating, and the longing was still present, and the silence from heaven had not broken. From inside chronos, her story looked like one of diminishing possibility. But Hannah's story was never operating in chronos. It was always operating in appointed time. The year she walked into the temple and prayed with her whole broken self, not performing faith but bringing the raw and unmanaged truth of her desperation into the sacred space. That year was not chosen by Hannah. It was not the year she finally prayed hard enough or believed enough or showed up in the right way. It was the appointed year, the kairos moment inside all those chronos days. And when it arrived, it did not ask how long she had been waiting. It simply opened. Your appointed time is not somewhere ahead of you in the distance, visible only after more chronos has accumulated. Your appointed time is the intersection you are standing inside of right now, in this moment, with this message reaching you at this specific point in your story. The fact that you are here is not a coincidence of algorithm or habit. It is the appointed time making itself known in the only language that can reach you, which is the language of recognition. Something in you already knows this. Something in you is already nodding before the mind has had a chance to decide whether to agree. What God has ordained, delay cannot cancel. I want to close this section by mentioning something briefly, because it belongs here, and I do not want to pass this moment without naming it. The restoration that kairos brings is not only spiritual, it is also physical. It is neurological. The brainwave frequencies that were suppressed by the long chronos season, the gamma and theta activity that carries the clarity and creative vision of the chosen ones, those frequencies are restored when the appointed time is recognized and the internal environment shifts to receive it. The genius wave, the 7-minute audio practice I mentioned earlier, works precisely at this intersection. It does not create the kairos moment. It prepares the brain to receive what the kairos moment is bringing. If you have not yet visited the link in the pinned comment, it is there whenever you are ready. It belongs to this moment as much as anything else I have shared. You are not late. You have never been late. You have been in Chronos, building the vessel that Kalatros requires. And Kairos, your appointed time, has arrived. Not almost. Not soon now. What I want to give you now is not a list of abstract promises. I want to take you into something specific and concrete, because you have been in the season of the unseen for long enough, and what is moving toward you deserves to be named in terms that are real and particular and grounded in the actual texture of your daily life. The shift that is coming is not happening in the spiritual realm alone. It is happening in the three most tangible areas of your existence, and I want to walk you through each one with the same directness that I have brought to everything else in this message. The first area is your relationships, and I want to begin here because this is the area where the shift will first become visible, often before you have words to describe what is happening. What you are about to notice is a gentle but unmistakable reorganization of the people in your immediate world. Some people who have occupied significant space in your life will begin to step back, not in conflict, not in rupture, not necessarily in any dramatic way, but in a gradual and quiet recession that will feel, at first, like loss. You may find yourself reaching out and not reaching back in the same way. You may find conversations that used to fill you beginning to empty before they end. You may notice that certain connections, ones you have maintained out of history rather than genuine resonance, are releasing their hold on you with an ease that surprises you. Do not resist this. Do not interpret it as a sign that something is wrong or that you are becoming isolated. What you are experiencing is not subtraction. It is preparation. The relationships that are receding were sized for an earlier version of you, and the version of you that is emerging from this season cannot be fully inhabited in the same relational environment that held the version who entered it. What is being made room for is something you may not be able to picture yet, because the people who are coming into your life in this next chapter have not arrived yet, and relationships that have not arrived yet cannot be pictured. But they are coming, and they will recognize you immediately, in the way that chosen ones recognize each other, in the way that feels less like meeting and more like remembering. They will speak the language of what you carry without needing it to be explained. They will arrive at the right moment from the right direction, and they will carry the right capacity for what you are about to walk into. The second area is your purpose, and this is where I want to be very precise, because purpose in the season of emergence does not arrive as a complete blueprint. It does not announce itself with a comprehensive plan and a clear 5-year trajectory. It arrives as a single small step. And the reason I want to name this carefully is because many chosen ones in the threshold moment miss the step because they are looking for the plan. They are waiting to see the whole staircase before they lift the first foot. The whole staircase is not what this moment is offering. This moment is offering one step. One small, clear, undeniable invitation to move in a specific direction. And if you take it, the next step will become visible only after the weight of your foot has committed to the first one. You will know the step because it will arrive quietly. It will not shout. It will not demand. It will not produce anxiety or urgency, or the sensation of pressure that false urgency creates. It will arrive up with a particular quality of peace that you will recognize if you have been sitting in the 7-minute practice, because the practice has been training your inner landscape to receive exactly this kind of quiet signal. The question that has been circling in you for months, perhaps for years, the question of what you are supposed to do and where you are supposed to go, and how the calling inside you is supposed to find its expression in the world? That question is about to answer itself. Not in a voice from outside, but in a knowing that rises from within, in a moment so ordinary and so unannounced that you might almost miss it if you were not already oriented toward it. And you are. You have been orienting toward it throughout this entire message, and the 7-minute practice has been the instrument of that orientation. The third area is resources and opportunities, and this is perhaps the one that has felt most painfully absent in the long season. And so I want to approach it with both honesty and precision. What is shifting in this area is not simply that more money is coming or more doors are opening, though both of those things may be true. What is fundamentally shifting is the relationship between your effort and your outcome. In the wilderness season, you have likely experienced a pattern that can only be described as disproportionate labor for disproportionately small return. You have put in more than was received. You have given more than was honored. You have worked and built and invested, and the harvest has not matched the sowing. That pattern is not a permanent feature of your life. It is a feature of the season you have been in, and this season is ending. What is coming in its place is something that chosen ones who have moved through the threshold describe in remarkably consistent terms. They describe a sudden shift in how opportunities arrive, from ones that require aggressive pursuit to ones that seem to appear at the exact moment they are needed, from directions that were not anticipated, through connections that were not engineered, in forms that precisely match the specific need of the moment. Not abundance as a vague spiritual promise, but provision as a precise and practical reality. The right resource at the right moment, the right connection at the right door, the right opportunity carrying exactly the terms that honor what you bring to it. This is not magic, it is alignment. When the internal environment of a chosen one shifts from suppression to restoration, when the brainwave frequencies that carry creative vision and intuitive recognition are functioning in their natural capacity, the same external world that appeared closed begins to appear differently. The same doors that looked locked begin to reveal handles. The same people who seemed inaccessible become reachable through paths that were always there but invisible to a mind operating beneath its designed frequency. This is why the genius wave is not incidental to the practical changes you are about to experience. It is connected to them at the level of how your brain processes possibility. Now, I want to speak directly to what you should not do during this period, because this is as important as knowing what is coming. Do not accelerate artificially. The shift that is moving toward you in all three of these areas is not something you can speed up through increased effort or urgent pursuit. The chosen ones who have tried to force the threshold open before the appointed moment have consistently found that the forcing delays rather than advances what they were reaching for. In this window, your assignment is not to push harder. It is to remain aligned, to hold the practice, to stay oriented toward the signal, rather than chasing the noise. Do not speak the emerging things to every ear. There is a wisdom in this season about what deserves to be shared and with whom. Not everything that is moving toward you needs to be announced before it arrives. The new relationships will see it when it is visible. The new opportunities will carry their own evidence. The purpose will speak for itself when it has had time to take its full shape. In this window, guard the emerging things with the same care that a seed requires before it has had time to break the surface. Do not allow the memory of what did not come to become a ceiling on what is arriving now. This is perhaps the most specific caution I can offer you, because chosen ones who have carried a vision through a long season can develop, almost without noticing, a protective skepticism toward promise. It is not cynicism, it is self-preservation. But in this threshold moment, that protective layer needs to be put down, because what is arriving now is not the same as what you were believing for in the beginning of the long season. It is larger. It has been shaped by the years of your preparation, and it carries the specific contours of everything you have been through. It will not look exactly like what you imagined at the beginning, because it is better than what you imagined at the beginning. You are capable of receiving all of this. Not almost capable, fully capable right now, exactly as you are. With every mark the long season has left on you, you can believe for all of it. Chosen ones from every part of the world are waking up to this same recognition at this same moment. And this message is traveling because it belongs to all of them, not because it belongs to a platform. If what I have just described in these 3 areas has named something real in you, consider pressing like as an act of choosing to be part of what is building here. Not just receiving it, but carrying it forward. Drop a word in the comments as a signal to every other chosen one. Watching that, they are not standing at this threshold alone. Share this with someone who is still deep in the waiting season and who needs to know the ground is already shifting beneath their feet. Choosing to subscribe is choosing to stay at the table, to remain inside this community of chosen ones who are emerging together into what was always meant for them. And if you feel moved to sow into the space that made this message possible, there is a way to do that in the pinned comment below. Knowing that what you extend here will grow something for the next person who arrives here, still searching for the words to name what they are carrying. Type the word receive in the comments if what I have just described in these 3 areas has landed in you as something true and real and already in motion. It is a set of promises delivered into a specific person, into someone who has been shaped in particular ways by a particular season. And I want to name that person now with more precision than I have named them anywhere else in this message. Because before the 3 areas of change can fully arrive, before the relationships reorganize, and the purpose clarifies, and the resources align, there is something that needs to be spoken over the person who is standing at this threshold. There is a name that belongs to you, and I want to give it to you now. You are a cycle breaker. I want to sit with that for a moment before I explain it, because names carry weight, and this one is no exception. A cycle breaker is not simply someone who has survived a difficult season. Survival is not the whole of what you are. A cycle breaker is someone whose entire journey through the wilderness, every year of waiting, every relationship that did not hold, every door that closed before they could walk through it, every night of insomnia, and every morning of pushing forward without visible evidence. All of it has been accumulating toward a single purpose that extends far beyond their own life. The breaking does not happen only inside you. It happens through you and beyond you, and into every lineage and community and circle of influence that your life touches. Let me be specific about what this means for you personally, because cycle breaker is not a title that floats above your life at a safe spiritual distance. It has roots that go directly into the ground of your actual experience. The cycles that are being broken through you are real cycles, not abstract generational patterns written in books, but living, breathing, inherited of being that have moved through the people before you, and that were on their way to moving through the people after you until you arrived, until you were placed in this specific body, in this specific family, in this specific community, with this specific assignment that required a season long enough and difficult enough to produce the kind of depth that cycle breaking demands. Think for a moment about what you have refused. Not what you have achieved, but what you have refused to pass forward. The silence that was modeled for you and that you chose to replace with honesty. The smallness that was offered to you as the definition of your life and that you quietly, persistently, sometimes without even knowing you were doing it, refused to accept. The fear that lived in the generation before yours and that you have been wrestling with, not because you inherit it as a permanent possession, but because you were the one appointed to be the last person in your line who would carry it. You did not choose this assignment in the way that a person chooses a career. You were formed for it, shaped by every single thing that felt like it was working against you, because the formation of a cycle breaker requires exactly the kind of pressure that you have been under. The world around you may not have the language for what you carry. The people who knew you before the long season may look at you and see someone who is still arriving at a life that was supposed to be further along by now. But what they cannot see, because it is not visible from the outside, is that the work you have been doing in the wilderness was not private work that stays private. It is the kind of work that opens something for everyone who comes after you. Your children, if you have them, or will have them. Your community. The people who will hear your story in the years ahead and find in it the permission they needed to stop carrying what was never theirs to carry in the first place. That is the weight of the name Cycle Breaker. And I want to say clearly that it is not a burden in the way that the long season has been a burden. It is an identity. It is a clarity about why the pressure was as significant as it was. The formation of a cycle breaker cannot happen in a comfortable season. It cannot happen in a life where everything opened easily and nothing required the deepest reserves of what you carry. The pressure was proportional to the assignment, and the assignment is larger than you have been told. Now I want to speak something over you that is not instruction and not information. It is a blessing, and I want you to receive it as such, not with your analyzing mind, but with the part of you that already knows it is true. May the clarity that has been forming in you during the long season now find its expression in the world without apology and without delay. May every relationship that was a preparation finally reveal itself as such. And may the new connections that are coming carry the kind of mutual recognition that makes you feel, for the first time in a long time, that you are in the right room. May the purpose that has been living in you as a question finally speak itself as an answer. And may the answer be simple enough to act on and large enough to carry you forward for years. May the resources that were withheld during the season of forming now arrive in forms that are precise and practical and perfectly matched to the specific needs of the assignment. Not in excess that creates its own confusion, but in sufficiency that builds steadily and compounds over time into something that sustains not only you, but the people whose lives you will touch through what you are building. May the insomnia that has been a companion of the long season give way to a rest that goes deep enough to heal what the years of wakefulness have worn down. May the loneliness that lived in carrying a vision that no one around you could fully see be replaced by a community of people who carry similar visions and who recognize you as a fellow traveler without needing you to explain yourself. May the grief of the years, the real and legitimate grief of what the season cost you in relationships and time and a version of your life that will not come back, may that grief be honored fully rather than rushed past. And may the honoring of it become one of the things that equips you to hold space for others who are still in the middle of theirs. And may the name Cycle Breaker settle into you not as a performance identity, but as a quiet and unshakable knowing of who you are and what you are here to do because someone told you. Not because a message assigned it to you, but because something in you already knew it before you had the word for it. And now the word has arrived, and the knowing and the word can finally inhabit the same space. You do not have to be more than you are to carry this name. You do not have to be further along, more healed, more certain, more visibly successful. You carry the name exactly as you are today, with every unresolved thing still sitting in its unresolved place. The name is not contingent on the arrival of what you are believing for. The name belongs to the version of you who has been in the long season and who is still here. That is already the whole of what it requires. What I want to share with you next builds on everything the name cycle breaker opens. Because a name is not the destination. It is the beginning of moving with clarity in a direction that the name makes legible. In Part 8, I want to walk you through the 3 specific areas of your daily life where the identity of cycle breaker will first become visible, not as a spiritual concept, but as a lived and practical reality. The shift is not happening in a realm you cannot touch. It is happening in the relationships you wake up inside of, in the work you are called to, and in the provision that has been aligned with your assignment all along. And what it looks like on the ground is something I want to give you in full, with the same specificity and the same care I have brought to everything else in this message. What you have just received in Part 7 is not only a name, it is a lens, and I want to use that lens now to look directly at the 3 areas of your life that are about to transform, because the name cycle breaker does not live in the abstract. It lives in the specific and the daily and the tangible, in the conversations you have and the work you do and the resources you move through. And I want to walk you through each of those 3 areas with the kind of precision that gives you something you can actually hold on to when you leave this message and step back into the ordinary hours of your life. The first area is relationships. And I want to begin here because this is where the transformation will first become visible, often before you have any other external evidence that something has shifted. What you're about to notice is a gentle but unmistakable reorganization of the people in your immediate world, and I want to prepare you for it so that when it begins, you do not mistake it for loss. Some people who have occupied significant space in your life will begin to step back, not in conflict and not in rupture, and not necessarily in any dramatic moment of separation, but in a gradual and quiet recession that will feel, at first, like something is dissolving. You may reach out and find the response landing differently than it used to. You may sit in a conversation that once filled you and find it emptying before it ends. You may notice that certain connections, ones you have maintained out of history or loyalty, or simply out of the inertia of long familiarity, are beginning to release their hold on you with an ease that surprises you and perhaps unsettles you. I want to say this directly to you. Do not reach back and pull those connections tighter out of fear. What is receding is not a sign that something is wrong with you, or that you are becoming isolated, or that the long season has damaged your capacity for relationship. What is receding was sized for an earlier version of you, and the version of you that is emerging from this season, the cycle breaker, who has been in the wilderness and is now stepping into the open, cannot be fully inhabited inside the same relational environment that held the earlier version. The reorganization is not subtraction. It is preparation. It is heaven clearing the table, so that what is coming has somewhere to land. And what is coming in the relational area of your life is something that chosen ones who have moved through the threshold describe in remarkably consistent terms. They describe a quality of connection that they had stopped believing was possible. not because they had given up on people, but because the depth they were capable of had never been matched by anyone they had met inside the long season. What is coming are people who carry the same language without needing it explained. People who recognize what you are building before you have finished describing it. People whose presence feels less like meeting and more like the completion of something that was always intended to be assembled. They will not arrive with fanfare. They will arrive the way all appointments do, quietly and precisely, and at the exact moment the space has been prepared for them. The second area is purpose, and this is where I want to be very specific with you, because purpose in the season of emergence does not arrive as a complete blueprint. It does not hand you a finished architecture of the next 10 years with every step numbered and every outcome guaranteed. It arrives as a single small step, one clear, quiet, undeniable movement in a specific direction. And if you take it, the next step becomes visible, but only after your weight has fully committed to the first one. The reason I want to name this so precisely is because many chosen ones in the threshold moment miss the step entirely because they are waiting for the plan. They have been in the wilderness long enough that their standard for moving has become a present sense of complete certainty, and complete certainty is not what the threshold offers. The threshold offers one step. It offers a single invitation that arrives not with urgency, but with peace, not with pressure, but with a quality of clarity that you will recognize if you have been sitting in the 7-minute practice, because the practice has been training your inner landscape to distinguish between the noise of anxiety and the signal of genuine direction. The question that has been circling in you for months, or perhaps for years. The question of what you are supposed to do and how the calling inside you is supposed to find its expression in the world. That question is about to answer itself. Not in a voice that comes from outside and announces itself dramatically, but in a knowing that rises from within, in a moment so ordinary and so unannounced that you might almost let it pass if you were not already oriented toward it. You will know it by its quality. It will carry the feeling of something remembered rather than something discovered. And you will know it is time to move, not because everything is certain, but because the peace of moving is greater than the peace of staying still. Take the step. Whatever the step is, take it. The cycle breaker does not wait for permission from external circumstances before moving in the direction that has been made clear internally. The cycle breaker moves, and the path confirms itself under their feet. The third area is resources and opportunities, and this is the area that I want to approach with the most care, because it is the one where the long season has perhaps left the deepest marks. If you have been in the wilderness for years, then you've likely lived with a pattern that can only be described as a sustained and disheartening gap between your effort and your outcome. You have given more than was received. You have worked and built and invested and shown up, and the return has been disproportionately small relative to what you brought. That pattern has not been a permanent feature of your life. It has been a feature of the season you have been in, and this season is ending. What is shifting in the area of resources is not simply that more is coming, though more is coming. What is fundamentally changing is the relationship between your labor and your harvest. In the wilderness season, that relationship was deliberately inverted as part of the forming process, because a cycle breaker who has only ever experienced easy abundance has not been prepared to steward what the assignment requires. The inversion was a formation tool, not a permanent condition. And what replaces it in this next season is something that chosen ones who have moved through the threshold consistently describe as a feeling of things finally moving with you rather than against you. Opportunities will begin to arrive from directions you did not pursue. Connections will appear through paths you did not engineer. Resources will show up in forms that precisely match the specific need of the moment, not in overwhelming excess that creates its own confusion, but in a steady and compounding sufficiency that builds towards something sustainable. You will find yourself in rooms you did not apply to enter. You will find that people with the capacity to carry what you are building begin to cross your path with a frequency that does not feel like coincidence, because it is not coincidence. It is alignment. But I want to give you 3 specific things not to do during this period, because knowing what is coming is only half of what you need. The other half is knowing what to set down. Do not force the acceleration. The shift moving toward you in all 3 of these areas is not something that responds to urgency. Chosen ones who have tried to manufacture the breakthrough through increased pressure have consistently found that the forcing delays what they were reaching for. In this window, your assignment is to remain aligned, not to push harder. Do not speak the emerging things prematurely. There is a wisdom in this season about what to share and with whom and when. Not everything that is beginning to move needs to be announced before it has fully arrived. Let the relationships reveal themselves when they are established. Let the purpose speak for itself when it has taken its full shape. Let the provision become visible before it becomes a testimony. Guard the emerging things with the same care that a tender new thing requires before it has had time to take root. And do not allow the memory of what did not come to become a ceiling on what is arriving now. This is perhaps the most specific caution I can offer, because chosen ones who have carried a vision through a long season can develop, almost without noticing it, a protective skepticism toward promise. It is not cynicism. It is self-preservation. But in this threshold moment, that protective layer needs to be gently and deliberately set down, because what is arriving now is not the same as what you were believing for at the beginning of the long season. It is larger. It carries the specific shape of everything you have been through, every refined quality, every depth that was added by the difficulty, and it is better than what you imagined at the beginning, precisely because it was formed alongside you rather than before you. You are fully capable of receiving all of it. Not almost capable, and not nearly ready, and not capable once a few more things are resolved. Fully capable, exactly as you are, right now, with every mark the long season has left on you still present and accounted for. You can believe for all of it. What you have just received in Part 8 is not a list of instructions that belongs to a future version of you who is more ready, more healed, more certain, or further along. It belongs to you right now, today, in the exact form you arrived in when you pressed play on this message. And before I take you into the closing of everything we have built together in this space, I want to do something I have not done anywhere else in this message. I want to thank you, not as a formality, not as a courtesy that sits at the end of something, the way a signature sits at the bottom of a letter. I want to thank you with the full weight of what I mean, because what you did today was not a small thing. You showed up in a season that has not made showing up easy, in a chapter of your life where the very energy required to keep believing has been stretched thin by years of waiting and disappointment, and the particular exhaustion that belongs to people who are carrying something large and invisible. You showed up here. You pressed play. You stayed. You listened all the way through to this moment, and that is not nothing. That is everything. Because the chosen ones who are furthest from there, breakthrough, are often the ones who stop just before it, who close the tab, who put down the message, who tell themselves they have heard this kind of thing before, and it has not changed anything, and they are too tired to hope again. You did not do that. You stayed. And I want you to know that the staying itself is the evidence of something that the long season could not touch, which is the part of you that still believes, quietly and stubbornly, and against considerable evidence to the contrary, that something is moving in your direction. All across the world right now, other chosen ones are inside this same message. They are sitting in different rooms, in different time zones, carrying different specific sorrows and different specific longings. And they are arriving at this same place you are arriving at, which is the end of something and the beginning of something else. You are not in this room alone. You never were. The silence of the long season made it feel that way, but the silence was never the truth of your situation. The truth is that you are part of a company of people who were chosen for a specific moment in history, who were formed in the wilderness precisely because the assignment required that kind of formation, and who are now standing at the threshold of everything the wilderness was preparing them for. You are one of them, and they are here with you right now, even if you cannot see them. I want to invite you into one final practice before we close, and I want you to take it seriously, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a real and deliberate act of release. I want you to imagine, right now, wherever you are sitting or standing or lying down, that everything you carried into this message is gathered in front of you. The grief of the years, the specific losses, the relationships that did not hold, the career that did not go as far as it should have gone by now, the dreams you stopped saying out loud because saying them out loud had become too costly, the insomnia, the loneliness that lived in being surrounded by people who could not quite reach the deepest part of what you were carrying, the quiet erosion of faith in yourself that happened slowly and without announcement over the years of the long season. I want you to see all of it gathered there in front of you, and I want you to imagine a threshold, a doorway, just behind where all of that is sitting. And I want you to leave it there, not because it was not real, not because it did not cost you what it cost you, but because you cannot carry it through the door that is open in front of you and receive what is waiting on the other side at the same time. The threshold will only accommodate one thing at a time. You can bring yourself through. You cannot bring the weight. Set it down, leave it at the door, and walk through. If something in that practice just moved in you, if something loosened or shifted or released even slightly, I want you to know that what you are feeling is not imagined, and it is not small. It is real, and it belongs to you to keep. Something real was built here today, in the space between this voice and your heart, and it belongs to both of us now. If this message has meant something to you, pressing like is simply a way of saying so without needing words. A quiet acknowledgement that something landed here that was true, and that you are glad you found it. And if you leave something in the comments before you go, even a single word, even just the word that rose in you when you heard your name spoken today, you will mean that no chosen one who finds this message after you has to feel like they arrived alone. They will see that you were here. They will see that you stayed. And that will matter to them more than you know. If there is one person in your life who is still deep in the waiting, still carrying the weight that you have just set down at the threshold, consider passing this message to them. Not with explanation, not with a long introduction, just with the simple and profound act of saying here, "This is for you." That is the most direct act of love a chosen one can offer someone who is still in the middle of what you have just come through. If you feel moved to remain in this community of chosen ones who are waking up together, Subscribing is simply the way of saying yes to staying at the table, of choosing to be here when the next message arrives, rather than having to search for it in a season when searching takes energy you may not have to spare. And if something in this message stirred a desire to pass something forward, to bless the next person who finds their way here, still searching for the words to name what they are. Carrying. There is a way to do that in the pinned comment below. Quietly and without pressure and without expectation, simply as an act of a chosen one, extending what they received. Now, before I close, I want to mention one more time some things I have spoken about throughout this message, because it belongs in this final space, and I would be doing you a disservice to leave it out. The Genius Wave, the 7-minute audio practice developed by Dr. James Rivers after over 30 years of research, exists for exactly this moment in your journey. Not the moment before the threshold, when you were still in the thick of the formation. This moment, the moment after the burden has been set down and the door is open, and the brain that has been operating beneath its designed frequency through years of suppression is ready to be restored to what it was always built to carry. If the Genius Wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, and you know it is a yes, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. It will be there when you are ready. And the 90-day guarantee means that the only risk is not trying it. You have come all the way through this message. You have been named and seen and honored and equipped and released. What is in front of you now is not more waiting. It is not almost arrival. It is the open door, the cleared threshold, the ground that has already shifted beneath your feet, even if your eyes have not yet confirmed what your spirit already knows. You are a cycle breaker. You carry something that the people after you desperately need. The cost of the long season was real, and it has been fully acknowledged, and it does not have to be carried any further than this threshold. What is on the other side of the door is proportional to everything it took to prepare you for it, which means it is larger than you have allowed yourself to imagine in the years when imagining felt too dangerous. Go through. You are ready. You have always been ready. And everything that is yours is already in motion toward you, moving with the same certainty and the same appointed precision that brought this message to you today at exactly this moment in your story. You have arrived at the end of something, and I want you to feel the full weight of that arrival, not as a finishing line that closes behind you, but as a doorway that opens in front of you, because everything that was spoken in this message was never pointing backward toward what you have been through. It was pointing forward toward where you are going, and where you are going is not a vague spiritual destination that lives somewhere in the distance. It is a specific and real and already in motion life that is being assembled right now in the unseen places, with the same precision and the same intentionality that assembled everything that brought you to this message today at this exact moment in your story. You came here carrying something. You may not have had a name for it when you pressed play. You may have arrived with nothing more than a quiet sense that something needed to shift, feeling that the season you have been in had lasted longer than it was supposed to, a weariness that was not ordinary tiredness, but the specific and bone-deep exhaustion of a person who has been holding something heavy and sacred for a very long time, without anyone around them, fully understanding the weight of what they were holding. You came here with all of that, and what I want you to know as you prepare to leave is this: you are not leaving the way you arrived. Something was given to you in this space, not as information, not as technique, not as a motivational framework that will dissolve by tomorrow morning when the ordinary hours return. Something was given to you that belongs to the deepest and most durable part of who you are, the part that the long season could not reach, the part that kept showing up even when showing up felt like the most expensive thing you could do with what little you had left. That part of you received something today that it has been waiting a long time to receive. And what it received will not dissolve when you close this video. It will go with you into the ordinary hours, into the conversations waiting for you, into the work that is calling for you, into the relationships that are being assembled around you, and into every quiet morning and every still difficult moment that lies ahead. You are a waymaker. I want to say that one final time, not as a label assigned from the outside, but as a truth that was already written inside you before anyone gave it a name. A truth that the long season was shaping you to carry without you fully knowing what you were being shaped for. A waymaker does not make a path for themselves alone. They move through their own life in such a way that the movement itself becomes a road for everyone who comes behind them. And every step you take forward from this moment is a step that widens that road for someone who is still standing where you were standing when you first arrived here today. That is not a burden added to everything you are already carrying. That is the meaning that was hidden inside the weight all along. Before you go, I want to leave you with something that requires nothing from you. Not effort, not focus, not a decision. Just the willingness to receive it. Wherever you go from here, carry this. You are seen, not by a platform, not by an algorithm, not by the people around you who may or may not have the capacity to perceive what you carry. You are seen by the one who placed the calling inside you before you had a name for it. By the one who designed the season you have been living through with the same care and precision that a master craftsman gives to the process that produces something that cannot be replicated. You are seen at the level that matters most, the level that no wilderness and no delay and no silence was ever able to touch. You are loved in the same way, not because of what you produced in this season, not because of how faithfully you carried the weight, not because you showed up to this message with the right attitude or the right measure of faith or the right amount of hope left in you. You are loved with a love that does not calculate and does not withdraw and does not require a performance before it extends itself. That love was present in every day of the wilderness. It was present in the sleepless nights, and the relationships that did not hold, and the moments when you argued against the voice that told you to give up. And it will be present in every step you take through the door that is now open in front of you, because that love is not behind you. It is ahead of you. It has always been ahead of you, preparing the way, clearing the ground, assembling what you could not yet see. And you are not alone. You have never been alone, even in the seasons when the silence made it feel that way. All across the world right now, chosen ones are leaving this same space, carrying the same quiet, knowing that something real happened here today. You are part of a company of people who were made for this specific moment in history, who were formed in the wilderness precisely because the assignment required that kind of formation, and who are now walking through their threshold and stepping into everything the long season was always preparing them for. You are one of them. They are with you, and together, though you may never meet on this side of eternity, you are making a way that the world did not have before you arrived. So go gently. Go without rushing what is coming, because it is already in motion and it does not need to be hurried. Go without apology for the years that looked different from what you imagined, because those years were not wasted and they were not a mistake. And they will make a kind of sense from the other side of this threshold that they could never make from inside the waiting. Go without the weight you arrived with, because you set it down at the threshold, and it belongs to the chapter that is now behind you. And go knowing this: the voice that found you in this message will find you again. It will find you in the small and unannounced moments. It will find you in the conversation that arrives at exactly the right time. It will find you in the morning that breaks differently from all the mornings before it. It will keep finding you because you are chosen, and chosen ones are never lost for long. Go well, Waymaker. What is yours is already in motion, and everything the long season prepared you for has already begun.